Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Believe it or not, even with the job that I have being on WBAP, I do not like to talk about politics at work. I mean, with you, I talk about politics, obviously. I mean, I'm a talk radio host. Of course, we have to talk about that stuff. But if you're scared of talking about politics at work, maybe you should be. It's never been like a real popular thing to have political conversations and political debates at the workplace. I would recommend against it unless you're in a 100% politically friendly environment. But this next generation, they seem to be getting the memo too. Keep your mouth shut about politics at work. My next guest, Julie Balke from the Balke Group, is a person we like to talk about when it comes to these workplace issues, these career issues. And a recent survey showed that about half of Generation Z would be willing to quit their job over politics.
Excuse me. Remember the good old days when we left politics and religion for outside the workplace? Well, when you look at like what's happened at work the last few years, that line between work and home has really disappeared. And so people feel perfectly okay bringing their whole selves to work. And part of that includes sharing their political beliefs. And this generation, Gen Z, is they're very insistent on bringing their whole selves to work. And they're very concerned about what their company's values are, where they donate their time and money, where their products come from. And so it's really just all smushed together. So therefore, they feel perfectly okay making decisions based on that, but also sharing their beliefs and moving on if you don't agree. So it's a pretty tough line for employers to walk. Yeah,
and I feel like that it didn't used to be okay to talk about politics any more so than it is today. Back in the day, it's just less things were political. Like there was never, until recently, there was never a discussion on what the law should be about what bathrooms people use. That's the politics came into our life. We didn't go into politics.
And the divide is just so significant right now, and it's so inflamed in terms of emotions, and it's any of those types of topics. What it is, it's not necessarily. And so we talk a lot, or I talk a lot about what are the things that when you look at what's appropriate at work, whether it's clothing, whether it's coming in on Monday morning and talking about how hungover you are. These are the kind of things that can be a demonstration of your judgment. Is it good judgment, right, to walk in at work on Monday morning and go on and on and on about your political beliefs, and you don't know how the people around you feel? What it shows is, are you using good judgment in how you're showing up at work? And that's really what it comes down to more than anything.
So is this a big deal for management? Should they be working to prevent their employees from discussing politics?
What's so interesting is with Gen Z, they're very sure they're right in a lot of these workplace things. But what they don't think is that the people who are making the decisions about my career are not my colleagues. They are older than I am, and they have a different perspective than I do. And so you can shoot yourself in the foot very easily. From a leadership standpoint, I think really, just not, first of all, don't do it yourself. As a leader, you have to be a role model. And when things, I don't think you can ever say you can't talk about those things. But I think when things are as heated as they are today, it can start to affect people's relationships and their ability to collaborate. And then as a result, the outcome. And that's the kind of things that managers have to worry about versus policing what people talk about. But yeah, it's from a individual perspective. I always tell Gen Z, look, in a few years when you're running things, you can do whatever you want. You can do your job from a raft in the ocean if you want to. But for now, the people who are still making those decisions around what the culture is going to be like, what they're going to reward, what they're not going to reward, that are really watching you and how you show up at work, those are the people who do have an impact on your career. And so, as we always say, read the room, and when in doubt, err on the side of being really cautious.
Well, we also have the big chunk of Gen Z that says, they would purposefully seek out a workplace that shared their politics. Yeah. And I get that kind of, but then part of me also thinks I would go work for IHateJamesParker.com if they paid good enough. So, where's the balance there?
Yeah. And remember, they are still Gen Z. The oldest person in Gen Z is 27. So they're still very young. And there is an idealism that comes with being young and that we all had when we were 27. But there's also the realities of life that as the days go on and they get older and they start having families, I think all of this is going to even out a little bit. And some of us, all of us have different priorities when it comes to work. And so if making the most money possible is your priority, okay, great. Then you probably aren't going to look at some of those cultural things. But if the cultural and values piece of what you do is most important to you, then you may be willing to give up salary. And so we all have our priorities when it comes to what the right job and workplace is. It's just they're much more willing to look at the holistic view of their workplace and of their employer and make their employment decisions based on that, compared to what previous generations did.
Yeah, well, Julie, I'm going to be far more cynical than this. I don't even think they believe what they're saying. When 40% of the younger generation says that they would quit their job if their CEO expressed views they disagree with, you might as well go ahead and quit your job. You really think you 100% agree with your CEO on all the political hot button issues? You don't. Take a walk. Go ahead. Live your values. Quit your job. I want to see you do it. They don't believe what they say. They're just saying that because they think that's the right thing to tell a surveyor. I have to believe that, Julie.
That could be. I mean, that absolutely could be. And so, when the reality of life smacks you in the face, you certainly do soften on those things. You have to.
All right, thank you very much. This is Julie Bauke. Find her at the Bauke Group, and that's spelled Bauke. You didn't think of getting an easier to spell name, Julie?
I know.
Kind of out of your jurisdiction.
Sorry about that.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
Right.
Julie Bauke on The James Show. Another round. Thank you very much. All right, coming up next, I'm going to play some more audio from the campaign trail and Kamala Harris, kind of doing the word salad thing again. But also, are you scared to talk about politics in your work? Do you have any tips for those of us who do feel like we have to walk on eggshells at the workplace? Because that's not very fun either. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. One of the things that is causing so much polarization in the election cycle that we're currently in is that one side keeps calling Trump Hitler, which makes you a Hitler supporter by default, which makes you a Nazi. That's not cool. And so that should be on your mind when you're discussing politics in the workplace. Some people think you're a Nazi, that you're either actively a Nazi supporter or you're so stupid that you're being duped by Nazis and don't even know it. So yeah, when you hear these people on CNN say stuff like that, you got to know that that's what some of your coworkers might be thinking about you right now. And with that, you have to go into the workplace and great. You don't get to be yourself. You can't speak freely. You have to second guess every thought that comes out of your head. And you can't ever relax. You can't ever be comfortable. Because these people have been trained to think that you're a Nazi. And I say trained to think that you're a Nazi because here's a news flash. You're not actually a Nazi, are you? So, yeah, there's a lot of reason for you to be suspicious of your coworkers and for you to be walking on eggshells at work. And it sucks, doesn't it? Isn't that terrible? So I want to hear your stories. 800-288-9227. Tell me how bad politics has ruined your workplace. Or tell me a story about how politics either got you fired or got someone else fired or something, because I'll tell you a couple of mine here, because this feels like a good time to air this stuff out. Because I don't want you to think just because I'm working on a station that is politically favorable to your worldview that this escapes me. Oh, no, it doesn't at all. Now, I'll go ahead and say right now, the company I'm working for, the boss I'm working for, the crew I'm working for, no complaints. Fantastic. And that's what it is at most of the places I've worked. Look, whenever I'm more of a libertarian than a conservative, but we're all on Team Red here. We're right wingers, and I've always been a minority in pretty much every workplace that I've been at, and I mean political minority. And in my first job, it was here in Dallas. It was on a different station, but we were on the Howard Stern station at the time. No one really cared. We didn't even talk about politics that much. Sure, it came up, but we were just doing comedy stuff and making fart jokes, talking about boobs and dumb stuff like that, cowboys. And then when I was on Sirius Satellite Radio, I knew my program director, which is the boss, the person who's over all the shows on a station. I knew he was a lefty, but it was never a problem. And he never complained about it. And in fact, when we were talking about show prep and stuff, I never felt like it was one of the factors that he even considered when, choosing topics or coaching us or, making promos or imaging or booking guests or anything like that. But that was different at the job I had in New Orleans. I first went there to be on the morning show, and it was two guys and a girl, just like Ernie, Hal J, and Carla Marion here. It was pretty much the same show in New Orleans. But our program director, not only was he of the lefty persuasion, at his previous job in Kansas City, he had been on the board of the ACLU. You understand that? I don't mean a card-carrying member of the ACLU. I don't mean he attended meetings. He was on the board. So out of all the lefty people who are so politically polarized and activated and activists that they're actually in the ACLU and go to meetings, he's on the board with like the 8 top people that are even more hardcore about it in that hardcore group. And it did bleed over, and it made work awful. I had to work for this dude for, 9 years or so. The first 2 years were kind of okay until the morning show fell apart. One guy went to Wall Street Journal. The other lady actually came to take a job here in Dallas. And so I was like, well, cool. Then I get to do the morning show, or maybe we can hire me a co-host. He said, no, I'm going to put you on the afternoon show with this other guy. And he hired a liberal to replace me. Now, it was a talk station similar to this. It had Rush Limbaugh on it. It had Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck. Jeepers, that sounds like a liberal wouldn't fit in on the morning show. He didn't. He did terrible. The highest he ever got was like 12th place in our target demographic, which, if you know what I'm talking about, terrible. You should get fired immediately if that's what you did. Did he? No, he was on there through the 2016 election, even just doing a horrible job. Meanwhile, I'm having to have meetings with him when I say political things on a show where we're expected to talk about politics. I just can't be too good at explaining my side because it makes him mad. I got written up for saying, seriously, I got written up for saying Martin Luther King was a Republican. Now, he wasn't a registered Republican or Democrat, but at the time in the late 50s and early 60s, the Democrats were still running around in hoods. They were still filibustering civil rights legislation in both the 50s. And then in 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, they filibustered it. Al Gore's dad filibustered it. Robert Byrd filibustered it. The Rehnquist, or what was his name? The guy that Bill Clinton interned for. So that's how bad it was. But it wasn't even just that. Like, he was a terrible human being. This is a guy who also hired beautiful women and tried to hook up with them. Like, hey, if we needed a new board op, I know this guy who works at this other station. He wants to come work with us. He'd be great. No, let's hire this young girl, fresh out of college, never been in radio before, wasn't in college radio, has no interest in being in radio. Why'd she get the job? I don't know. It's just a coincidence that the last 3 girls he's hired are beautiful. Well, when that didn't work out for him, he would try to hook up with them. He couldn't hook up with them because he wasn't attractive. He ran a few of them off. And so then he hired some less than attractive girls. And that actually worked. And that's even worse because one of them was married. And when her husband found out, she had to get a divorce. She tried to sue the company. They settled. She's out of the business forever. He got to keep his job. They just swept it under the rug. He didn't get fired for that. How come I have to be having meetings explaining my political positions on a conservative talk station, being totally in line with the rest of the shows? But he gets to keep his job. After this, after having to settle a lawsuit, the company had to pay tens of thousands of dollars, I'm sure, to get her to go away. And then he got her replacement pregnant. After that, for the last 2 years I worked for him, he tried to get me fired every single day. That's how bad it can be, even when you work for a conservative talk station, even when you work like next to Glenn, Rush, and Sean. That's what you have to deal with. I want to hear your stories. Your political horror stories in the workplace. Has politics ever cost you a job? Has it ever ruined your workplace? 800-288-9227. 888-288-9227. Coming up next, we're going to talk to a security expert, Frank Robertson, again, talking about the 2 attempted assassinations of Donald Trump, and is there another one coming? This is The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.